Hi, it's Mary Jane Copps, the phone lady, and this video is about empathy and its role in story finding. One of the reasons that we hesitate to employ our empathy is that we believe that if we employ empathy, we are being emotional. And that's not true. Empathy is about recognizing, honoring, and working with the emotion that exists in a situation, in a challenge, in a problem, in a project. Emotions are part of how our clients, our customers, our prospects are dealing with their challenge, their problem, their project. There are emotions there. And if we don't acknowledge them, then we can't deliver excellence. The word empathy actually comes from the German, and I'm going to take a shot at pronouncing the German word, which is Einfühlung. Einfühlung. And it means in feeling. And so empathy is actually being in sync with the emotional content of a situation. It doesn't mean you have to feel those feelings, but that you acknowledge them, you recognize them, and you work with them as part of your work, part of your service, part of your expertise. I'm going to share two stories with you that illustrate how empathy can be employed. So the first goes back maybe 6 or 7 years now, and I got a call from a CEO who was interested in my coming in and working with the sales team, helping them uncover exactly what the challenges were that were preventing them from reaching their revenue goals. Now, I had a meeting with the CEO and 2 members of the senior management team, and that was a very awkward meeting. I have no idea. I had no idea why. There was a ton of tension in the room, and one of the gentlemen in the meeting was really kind of hostile. I knew it didn't have anything to do with me, but I also didn't know what it had to do with. I had no idea. I left that meeting, and it was 3 months before they contacted me, and we went ahead with my working with them on a 3-month contract. Now, in that interim, the CEO was no longer the CEO. And one of the 2 members of the senior management team was now in that role. So that told me something, even though I still didn't really know the story. Anyway, I went in for my first day of the contract. I was on site for about 3 hours, and I met with the sales team. And in the course of our conversation, they shared with me that they felt deceived, that the job they were doing was not what they had been told it would be. And as a consequence, they were also resentful. And I was like, okay, well, that would make it hard to do your job if you feel deceived and as a consequence are resentful. That's big stuff. So towards the end of that 3-hour time on site, the current CEO said, how's it going? And I said, great. And there's something I'd like to talk to you about. And he said, okay, I'm on my way up to a meeting. And I said, well, no problem. So we stepped into a very small office. And the size is important because we ended up speaking to each other, and we were almost knee to knee in this space, looking at each other, having this conversation. And I shared with him, that the sales team was felt they had been deceived, and that they were feeling resentful. Now, as soon as I said that, his face changed. It was only for seconds, but on his face was written the fact that he also felt deceived, and that he was carrying a tremendous amount of guilt that the sales team felt deceived. So that look just flashed across his face, and he was sitting in front of me trying to put something into words, and I was able to say, "It's okay, never mind. I understand. You don't need to say anything else." And he didn't. Well, I still didn't know the story. I had a much deeper understanding of what was going on in this company, in this space. And the end result was that I finished the contract in 30 days instead of 90 days. And when I delivered my final report, I said, "You know what? You don't need me anymore." So I fired myself. The data I gave them, the information I gave them, was all they needed to make the necessary decisions they had to make going forward. And they were very grateful. They were grateful that I fired myself, but also they were grateful for what I was able to do and deliver to them. And those two individuals are people in my life that I know I could contact at any time, and they would do their best to support and help me, and vice versa. There's a tremendous amount of trust there, and a tremendous amount of loyalty. And our communication throughout that project and today contains clarity. We know how to communicate with each other very, very well. And that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't acknowledged, understood, and worked with the emotion that showed on the CEO's face, as well as the emotion shared with me by the sales team, of course. Now, the second story relates to customer service, and it takes us back quite a ways, 16 or 17 years ago. After I had sold my first business, I took some time off before starting the Phone Lady. And in that time off, I helped a friend build his software business. Now, when I say that to you, this wasn't a gargantuan corporation. It was a relatively small business. There were about 12 clients when I started helping him build that business, and we grew it to just over 100 clients. And the software itself was front desk software, and by that I mean it was used to book appointments and schedule appointments, and also produce invoices and receipts. So as I got to understand the software, I not only did the sales, but I took over the support, the customer support. And you know, when people would call me with an issue with the software, they were often sitting at reception at the front of the office space, and there were clients at their desk waiting to book an appointment, or waiting for a receipt or an invoice or whatever. So they were stressed that the software wasn't working. And I acknowledged that immediately with them. So one of my first questions would be, do you have clients waiting right now in front of you or nearby? Yes, I do. Okay. So just the fact that we would share that would help them lower their stress level. And if it was a problem or a challenge I had already solved in the past and knew how long it would take, I would say, you know, I've encountered this before. It's going to take us about 5 or 10 minutes to resolve it for you. You could hear them relax even more on the other end of the phone. And then when they did that, they were now able to hear me, and we were able to work together to solve that software issue. Also, if you think back 16, 17 years ago, not everybody was comfortable using a computer. Some of the individuals that were using the software were very uncomfortable with the computer. So I would always ask that question, you know, are you comfortable here on the computer and working with me to resolve the problem. And they would be honest. They'd say, well, no, I'm not really comfortable. I don't know anything about computers. I would hear that a lot. And I would say, well, no problem. I'm going to walk you through this step by step. It's really very simple, because often I had to get them into the back end of the software to resolve the issue. And I wanted them to relax with me so they'd hear me. And then I really would. I'd say, okay, the first thing we're going to do, the second thing we're going to do. So acknowledging their emotional reaction to the situation they were in, and then applying a logic to that, a step-by-step logic, allowed us to communicate clearly and resolve the problem. If I hadn't acknowledged their emotion at all and just said, okay, well, here's what we're going to do, that stress would have still been there. They wouldn't have been able to hear me. We wouldn't have been able to work together to resolve the problem. So empathy for me really is the champion of story finding. Without knowing, acknowledging, working with the emotions that are present, we can't build excellence. So I really encourage you to employ your empathy. We all have access to empathy. And when you employ it in your work, what you will find is that you build trust extremely quickly, that loyalty is something that you acquire very easily as well. But also, and perhaps most importantly, is your communication becomes extremely clear and straightforward. Thanks for listening.